The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Welcome back to No Ifs, Ands, or Buts. Great podcast about divorce attorneys. Not really about attorneys, but divorce. By the way, I have a very dear friend of mine who is my attorney, and she listens to the show every single week. She says it's fantastic. So if my attorney thinks it's great, and the only reason you're not my attorney is because I had her first, and I did business with them 12, 13 years
Amanda,
ago. So,
I love Amanda to death.
Yeah, Amanda's the best.
Birmingham Men's Law Firm.
Yep.
Amanda Brown.
She's great.
She's great. I love her to death.
mbutslaw.net, mbutslaw.net, 948-4958, 948-4958. What's going on in the world of divorce attorneys? Anything new and exciting going on for you?
Man, just a lot of the same stuff, just a lot more of it.
Let me ask you this. Is there, and I know you guys got to share stories, right, between attorneys, I'm assuming, but has there ever been someone that shared a story with you that you had never heard before? Because I'm sure you've heard it all, but has there been a story from anyone where you're like, wow, I've never heard that, where someone said, you got to hear this because this has never happened to me before, and it's just something off the wall?
I mean, look, we're allowed to share facts. Obviously, we're not sharing people's confidential information, their names, anything like that.
Yeah.
But sometimes you legitimately have a question. You're like, you know what? I know somebody who's also seen this set of facts, and I'm gonna call them, and they'll tell you a story about something similar. That's kind of how it works.
Gotcha.
So, I've had multiple cases where there have been upwards of 15 children.
Wow.
And I've had to, ask around about stuff like that. Obviously, I've heard some very, very insane, crazy stories, but if I tell the details of those, that would break some confidentiality.
I want you to get in trouble. Let me ask you, but let's make this a question. info@tonykurreradio.net, info@tonykurreradio.net. Send those emails. We got a bunch of them to get through to today. We'll get through some of them. We may knock out the rest of them next week if we don't have more. We get a lot of questions because obviously, to go through a divorce is expensive, and a lot of people have a lot of questions, and keep them coming. We'll answer them for you for free right here. If you do have a situation where you have a lot of kids, 8, 9 kids, 6 kids, I mean, 1 kid's a lot, and as coming from a guy who's got 3 kids, and I'm a single father, and I know she's a single mother, it's hard to have 3 kids and take care of them. But when you have that many kids, typically, how does a judge look at that? I mean, do you separate that? Because you're not supposed to separate kids, right? Do you go 5 and 5? How does that usually? I mean, you can't really take one person and have them have custody of all 10 children, can you? Or do you?
Well, the parent trap method hasn't really been. That's not really what we do. That is a thing. It's called split custody. There is a law for that, but most of the time you're going to see a primary parent and a secondary parent. And I don't really want to say a secondary parent, but I mean, it is standard visitation. Sometimes you see 50-50, things like that. But for the most part, there's a reason why they call it standard visitation. Yep. The big question comes with the child support because the matrix that we have for our calculations only goes so far, and it does not go to 15. So what you do is you treat it as if the party's income exceeds the guidelines as well, and you go by the needs of the children. So at that point, you treat it, in calculation-wise, you would treat it a little more like alimony. You would look at, okay, what's the grocery bill every month? What's the power bill every month? What's this, that, or the other? And then what's mom's contribution? What's dad's contribution? And then you would figure out, the best, most reasonable number to sustain that.
Yeah. That'd be tough. I mean, just from a child support situation, because we know that a lot of people get married not to save money, but it does save you a lot of money. You got one mortgage, you got one power bill, you got one of everything. You're sharing meals, which makes things a lot cheaper. And so to have custody, and of course, if you're going to get custody, you're going to get custody. You got to take those kids regardless. You'll figure the money out later. But that's just the way it is. We had a really interesting talk, by the way, on Fox 6 2 weeks ago about how often, and we got a little biblical on it. So it was kind of up my alley a little bit. We were talking about married couples who have kids And typically would like to think that a married couple gets married and says, hey, okay, how many kids are we going to have first, because Megan, the meteorologist is pregnant right now. God love her and best of luck for everything she does. So it was quite topical. But if these people can't afford to have kids, why are they still having children? And I was talking about, in the Bible, it says to replenish the earth and be fruitful and blah, 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 blah. And it's amazing how many people do have kids and they're like, we can't afford it, but we'll figure it out. And somehow they do. And then Josh was like, do they? Do they really figure it out? Or is that kid just screwed up his entire life and you just don't know it? And I'm like, well, I really don't know. So that's something that's probably a different topic for a different show, but we can get into that. Info at TonyCurryRadio.net, info at TonyCurryRadio.net, mbutslaw.net, mbutslaw.net. He's the best. Divorce and family law is what he does. So if you got any questions, feel free to bring it in here. This is from Barry in Birmingham. Typically, what percentage of women get custody in a divorce in Alabama, and does it differ from state to state?
Okay, I can speak of nothing outside of the state of Alabama. However, most of the time, and it's not because someone's a woman or because someone is a man, most of the time, the one who does the primary caregiving responsibilities is the strongest candidate for custody. You already know who the doctors are. You already know when bedtime is. You give them baths. You cook for them. You clean for them. You're doing all these things for them already. There's really not that much for you to learn in order to be a primary caregiver because you already are one. Mm-hmm. So if that's the man, you're a stronger candidate for custody. If that's the woman, I would think that she would be a stronger candidate for custody. Now, this differs judge by judge, depending on which courtroom you're in. You might have a courtroom that prefers 50-50 custody. There are not a lot of those. So it just really depends, number one, on the facts of the case and how things went during the marriage, who actually did these things, and number two, which courtroom you're in.
Can you talk about, well, obviously there's a stigmatism there that the woman is always going to be the caretaker, and that's not always the case. Right. And there's also going to be a cultural difference where I can't imagine, even though it wasn't apropos back in the 50s and 60s, divorces had happened. And so, and the other thing is do you have more men now wanting custody of their kids than you did back in the 50s and 60s?
Yes, you do. Sometimes that is because they are good fathers and they want equal time with their kids because they have been doing a lot of the primary caregiving stuff. Mm-hmm. Other times it's because they don't want to pay child support. Yeah. I mean, there are two sides of that coin. So you see some really, really, really good guys that are just like, no, I've always been a primary caregiver in my child's life just as much as she has, and there's no good reason why we can't be 50-50 or more than she has. Yeah. So why can't I get custody here? Valid point. But if it's, well, I don't want to pay her any money, then no, sure. That's not going to work.
And somehow it always seems like it comes down to the mighty dollar. Some way it does. It always comes down to money. I'm just telling you, if you don't think you're going to have any money issues, you better think twice. Info at TonyCurryRadio.net. Brad says, if I have wealth before I get married, can I keep it during a divorce even without a prenup? We talked about this a couple weeks ago, didn't we? If you come in, yes. if you got $350,000 in your 401k, you get married. This obviously sounds like a guy that does not want to bring up a prenup because obviously some people don't like the idea of a prenup because it assumes you're going to get divorced in the first place. But typically, would he keep that money? And vice versa. I know if a woman comes into something and maybe she's worked for a long period of time before you end up having children, she stays home. Does she get to keep her money?
Generally speaking, what you accrued before the marriage in terms of a retirement is going to be considered separate property, and anything you accrue during the marriage would be considered marital property. So if you've got $350,000 in your 401k, then a very, very strong argument can be made that that's yours. Like most of the time, it only goes back to either the date of the filing of the complaint for divorce or I'm sorry, it cuts off there or at the final judgment of divorce and then goes back to the date of marriage. So it's that span of accrual that will matter the most
Okay.
in terms of property division.
Good question. Info at TonyCurryRadio.net. Info at TonyCurryRadio.net. Sheila in Southport. Is it Southport, Alabama, I guess? She said, is there an example of when the length of a marriage actually matters? And it's an interesting. That's an interesting question because I think a lot of people would say, we've been doing this way for 10 years, and that would be different than if you're getting divorced after 2, particularly if it involves kids.
So the state of Alabama recognizes a 20-year marriage as a long-term marriage, and what that affects is this. It can affect several other things, but concerning alimony, the court is going to consider alimony on a 20-year marriage where one party has a sufficient estate and the other party does not. But they're going to consider it, whereas if it's not considered a long-term marriage, they may consider it. So the chances of at least the issue of alimony being considered go way up once
you hit 20,
past that 20 years.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How long typically does alimony go? Having been through a divorce, I know this, but I wanted to throw this question out there for a lot of people. And again, this is a show. We don't make light of this. Been there, done that. But in a lot of cases, I hope married people do watch this show and they think, you know what, this ain't worth it, man. Go watch No Ifs, watch No Ifs, Ands, or Buts, and we ain't going through this shit, baby. This is real, and I, because we're not gonna polish a turd here. For sake of one of my lousy analogies, but typically, because I know that sometimes women want alimony for the rest of their life. Some women, because in a lot of cases, women haven't been working for a long period of time, particularly if they're their caretaker. But how does that typically work?
Well, you want to always look at the estate of the parties, and you want to look at, because if they're both rich, like there's not a lot of point in alimony, right?
Yeah.
But you need to consider that there's 2 different types of alimony. There's periodic alimony, and then there's rehabilitative alimony. Rehabilitative alimony, it can be paid off in a lump sum. It's considered as part of a property division, and it's alimony to get you back on your feet. Say you're in your 30s when you get divorced and you need to finish college, or you need to do this, that, or the other to get to a better station in life. Well, that's what it's intended to do. Periodic alimony, on the other hand, it can have an expiration date. It may not have an expiration date, just depending on the facts of the case, the age of the parties, the length of the marriage, the estates of the parties, all sorts of factors that go into that. And it really, honestly, just depends. That's the most lawyer answer you could get.
Oh, that's good.
There's a lot of factors.
Something we actually talked about briefly before we started the show today. This comes from Michael in Tuscaloosa. Can the primary custodian move with the kids, or what's involved in taking the kids and moving them? Obviously, we're not talking about down the street. We're talking probably from one state to the next.
All right. So if you're wanting to move out of state, and every single divorce decree, there is or should be the Alabama Relocation Act. And what you're going to have to do is going to give you an amount of time, and you notify the other party with certain information that's listed out in that act, and then they have a certain amount of time to object to that. And an objection looks like a new case in court. So objection to relocation would be the case. And then you'll open up a brand new case on, it's not necessarily whether this party can move, because a party can move, but it's whether or not the kids are going with them.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And that's generally the big issue there.
That's, and I would imagine that could get pretty ugly, depending on how long.
Oh, it can.
And the thing that's happening here during the entire time is your kids are getting older. There's that ticking moment. I never forget, when you have kids, people always enjoy every minute of it because it goes by so quick. Well, when you cut it in half, it's going to go twice as fast. If you cut it even more, it's just a different way of life for sure. So that's going to be kind of difficult. 948-4958, 948-4958, mbutslaw.net, mbutts, it's B-U-T-T-S, law.net. He's the best divorce and family law. Check him out. We've been friends for a while now, and he actually met him through one of my other shows. So thanks to Spy for Rent for hooking us up. They did good stuff here. We got Tabitha wants to know. This is interesting coming from a woman, but she wants to know a man on man. I guess it could be a woman on woman. Is gay marriage is legal in the state of Alabama, right? It's been legal for about 10 years, something like that. Okay. Is there any difference between same-sex marriages and regular typical marriages when it comes to law? Is there any differences at all?
I mean, no. I mean, a homosexual divorce and a heterosexual divorce are handled about the same way. The only issues you may have is if one party is the biological parent of children and the other party has not adopted those children, or when it comes to children, you just want to make sure that, I mean, look, if you're both parents, there probably needs to be an adoption there, because that could get sticky in a divorce. It really can.
Okay. Another question. I think I asked you this question several weeks ago, but thanks for tuning in, Mark. Name your favorite divorce movie. I didn't realize, by the way, how many divorce movies were out there. I know we were talking about Kramer versus Kramer.
We've had this conversation before.
We did.
And you reminded me of the one that should be number one.
Yeah.
Kramer, Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah, Mrs. Doubtfire, Kramer versus Kramer. Was it War of the Roses? Which one was with Michael Douglas and was it Kathleen Turner?
You know, I've seen so few of these. I have not seen these movies.
And people would typically think that you'd seen all of them, but it's like whenever there's a radio movie, people are like, "Did you see that?" You know, or they think that because I'm in radio, I've seen every rock and roll documentary. Have you seen Almost Famous? You've seen Almost Famous, haven't you? I'm like, no, and they're like, "You haven't seen Almost Famous, really?" And I'm like,
I haven't either.
No,
I've heard it's great.
Yeah, I hear it's great. I've heard there's a lot of great documentaries out there, but I'm not aware of one of those things. So yeah,
Intolerable Cruelty is pretty good.
Intolerable Cruelty.
Yeah, it's got George Clooney and Catherine Zeta-Jones. It's way over the top. It's entirely satirical, but it is hilarious.
And there's also Irreconcilable Differences, which is I think I brought that up. I think that's the first movie that Sharon Stone appeared in. And I remember that because she had hairy armpits. Yeah, it was weird. I was like, man, why? Why? And she was like an adult. And I'm like, why did they leave her with hairy armpits in this movie? And it really had no play into why. I was like, why are you doing that to this poor woman? But I think that was the one where the kids actually try to divorce the parents.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, Emancipation.
Yeah.
Wow.
Is that real?
It is.
Have you ever done one?
No.
How rare is that?
I think that's done over in probate court. I don't really go over to probate. You don't really hear about that a lot. You don't hear about it a whole lot, but every once in a while you hear about it.
And that would be, how would that work?
I don't really do it. But what they would do is file a petition with the probate court for emancipation from their parents and, according to grants.
I guess you had like a 13, 14, 15-year-old and was living with grandma, and she was super, super happy, and her parents were a pain in the ass, and she finally just didn't want anything to do with them, and grandma said, I'd take it, but someone would have to take custody of that minor, right? And you wouldn't do it after you're 18 because then you're an adult.
But so most of the time, when I see that situation, it's going through a family court, and it is a custody case, and grandma has petitioned for custody. An emancipation, I believe would, I don't know that would continue child support, but if through the custody case, grandma gets custody of the child, then those parents are going to owe her child support, and it helps benefit the child. So generally that's the route that we see taken.
Yeah.
Because, think about it, a 13-year-old child on their own. I don't know the ages of people who do this. Maybe they're more like 17, 18-year-olds. I really don't know, but it would be a lot.
Yeah. Ben in Hoover wants to know, how often do kids actually testify in a divorce case? You got to be really careful. You got to be really careful with something like that because you don't want to get your kids involved. Of course, it depends a lot on their age. A lot of people say, well, my 13-year-old is as mature as any 18. Well, that's fine. That's great. But if you do have, you don't want to put them through that trauma.
That's right.
Yeah. So just be careful with that.
Sometimes
does that go far with the judge when you have a child?
Oh, the judge. If you look, I can't speak for every single judge sitting on the bench, but I do know for a few of them, if you have a child in that courtroom, you better have a very, very, very good reason for doing it. And most of the time, every time I would say that I've had to have a child at a courthouse, I've asked for in-camera testimony wherein the child will go speak with the judge directly. Sometimes you can just exclude the parties. That's the way I prefer it. I don't even want to ask that child questions. I prefer opposing counsel not ask that child questions and just let the judge have a conversation with the child. Yeah. That's the way it goes. If you have to do it, I prefer that. Now, don't get me wrong. We've got a right to ask questions. We've got a right to all this, but we're waiving that and letting the child speak with the judge. Yeah. So, anyways, it's really, really tough. You don't want to rush your child into court because that will backfire on you. That will, if you want to bring your child to court just to talk about his birthday party last year where y'all had a great time together, man, just show some pictures. Yeah. Show some pictures.
Okay. Info at TonyCurryRadio.net, info at TonyCurryRadio.net. We got time, I think, for a couple more here. This is from Pete in Vestavia Hills. He's 28 years old, has been left a large amount of money in a trust that he'll receive when he's 30. He's in a relationship right now and wants to get married. He's like, I love her and I don't care. I'm never going to leave her, blah, 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 blah. We've all heard this story. But on behest of a friend of his saying you need to write an email to the No Ifs, Ands, or Buts show and get an answer from these guys because they're pros, you namely. So thank you for coming to us because this could save you a lot. Is that something he should wait for? Do you want to get married before you get that large amount of, I don't know how much, let's say it's $10 million, just so we can put a number on it. Is that something that you want? How would you deal with that?
All right.
He says it's she doesn't. He doesn't think that she knows either. So I mean, that probably plays into it. I don't know how long they've been dating. I don't know if they've known each other for 2 weeks or 20 years. But typically, what would you do there?
So if you're getting married to somebody and you're expectant of a trust, look, the trust, I'm sure it's going to be very, very well written. It is going to be handled by expert trustees. It's going to be very, very well handled. However, in divorce court, and depending on which county you're in, it can go really, really ugly too, and judges can blur the vision of what's separate property and what's not. So I would, not in Jefferson, but maybe in some other counties, I would have a prenuptial agreement done on that, just as extra insurance. Again, I'm not saying the trust isn't written well, but I'd much rather have 2 documents securing that type of thing than one.
That's a hard that's a hard discussion, man. When you're in love,
I've seen it go bad. And let me just say, and I'm not pointing any fingers anywhere. I've been to a lot of places. I've seen it go really, really bad. So I would strongly encourage the prenuptial agreement as well.
Yeah, that's, because you don't want to, I know some people that, and obviously if she's bringing money into the deal, she may go, fine, that's great. But there is going to be a point of contention there because whenever you're thinking about divorce, while you haven't even gotten married yet, but you do want to have your bases covered. And I'm trying to think to myself, if I had a woman that wanted to marry me that was worth $500 million and wanted me to sign a prenup,
I would think that would be reasonable.
Honestly. I would think it'd be reasonable too, but it would always probably be in the back of my mind. It'd be stuck in my head a little bit that I had to sign that. And I always think that, she can leave whenever she wants, but she doesn't want to do that anyway. That's probably a family thing.
I get it, but business and love. Yeah. Handle your business. Handle your love. And if you really love each other, this business stuff isn't going to really even matter. The stuff that you signed is not going to matter at all. If something breaks down, that's when it matters.
Hell, you know what? I'd probably say I'd be okay with this, but I do expect to be taken care of.
Yeah,
if you got $500 million, if you have $500 million coming at the age of 30, and we end up getting divorced, then you can have that money. But I do expect a hell of a nice parachute. So on my way out, I can at least take care of the kids or do whatever.
And every single prenup, there needs to be 2 attorneys.
Yeah,
there really does.
Yeah,
and you do that and you cover your bases, and it doesn't mean you're getting greedy, but it means you're taking care of yourself because, hey, if we're bypassing court, there are things I would get from court likely.
Yep.
Let's handle that too. Yeah, it's a two-way street, 100%.
Great job, my man. Matthew Butts. Go to mbutslaw.net, mbutslaw.net. His phone number is 948-4958, 948-4958. That's area code 205. He's a great divorce and family law right here in Birmingham. Does wonderful work, stays busy, and we're going to get you some more clients. I like to think that, with you having no clients, that would be a great thing, but then we wouldn't be doing a show.
That's right. I want
to see you make some jack, man. Not the best, of course. People's marriages falling apart, but it's a real thing, and it happens, and so we're here for you. And thoughts and prayers that go to anyone who's got to deal with the big D.
That's right.
The big D, because it never ends. It just never ends. All right, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Tony.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.